one last nugget of a session before the food cart rolls in, if it's not here already. I'd like to invite to the stage Akim Berg, the fashion industry expert. Thank you so much for coming. A round of applause. Sit down. The future of fashion. It's a big topic we put on this session. Before we go into that heavy thing, I'd like to just thank you for coming. And many people know Akim as the McKinsey guy and the guy behind the State of Fashion report that you helped create and publish together with the Business of Fashion with the past few years. But I also know there is a Nordic connection. You drove down here from Sweden today, which I'm really happy about. So you're actually at home in a way. What's the Nordic connection in your family?
I even got a tan this year, not last year. No, I spent my last 30 summers at the Swedish west coast, a bit north of Göteborg. So my wife is half Swedish. My mother-in-law comes from Göteborg, and so I always had a sweet spot and have a sweet spot for Scandinavia, and there's no debate about where we spend the summer. So I always pray for good weather, and once in a while, I think I hope for a distraction, like an invitation to Copenhagen, to connect with the rest of the world. But I had a great longer summer this year, so it has been fun.
Well, happy to have you. I mentioned a little bit about your background, and I feel like I catch you in a very interesting time in your life. There's a lot of change happening in your work life, but maybe a short introduction of yourself and what you've been up to in the last few years.
Yeah, I spent my last 24 years with McKinsey. So joined right after university, or even did my first internship during university studies. Somehow stumbled into fashion, which McKinsey was always involved in and advising on, but which was not at the core of what we were doing. And we spoke a lot about the changes in the fashion industry. Also, the consulting industry has changed a lot. So when I joined 24 years ago, fashion was a kind of a weird subject, almost frivolous industry, and we were more focusing on retail and food and banks and industry and stuff like that. Together with a lot of friends, we then got more serious about it. We founded the apparel, fashion and luxury practice some 15 years ago. And one of the braver and, in hindsight, smarter decisions was to do proper research and to join forces with Imran Ahmed of BOF and to do the annual State of Fashion report. So, and because I got so excited about it, we continued doing that, and probably 18 months ago, I felt like there is some change required, and there is maybe an opportunity to focus even more on the things that I like, which is researching and on the other side, continuing advising some of the players. So I work with the CEO and the management team of Mango as my core client at the moment, but I'm in the process of working on other ideas.
Well, I want to ask you about that, but let's stick on the work you've done with the State of Fashion, because I feel like you really put yourself on the forefront of kind of business intelligence in the fashion system, and I think Imran did that as well, of course, with founding Business of Fashion and really putting that on the front stage. When looking back at these years, I think it was 7 or 8 years you've been publishing this report. How has this kind of changed or elevated your view of the industry? Just any insight you
I
can
think
share.
it was always a great routine, because normally at this point of the year, I would have started with a team to work on, looking into the rear mirror. How was the last 12 months and how have things evolved? Also compared then to our predictions from last year. And it's difficult to be in an industry of predictions, yeah, because and you must know that it's you can't get it all right, but if you get it. People remember more the things you get right than the things you get wrong. Yeah, so you need to be a bit careful on that one, and then you start, thinking about what will shape the industry next year. So we always had a lot of brainstorming sessions with the BOF team, We discussed the different topics. We thought, oh, I don't know, the end of ownership, rental and repair and resell. I think that was one of the topics 5 years ago.
Mm.
And then we said, oh, could that be real? And then we added, I think, a bit the McKinsey touch to it. We really went deep on data, and we said, oh, we're not going to predict this will be relevant if we cannot find evidence for that. And then we had a very rigorous process of checking a lot of ideas and then distilled it into the 10 themes. And that was lots of fun. And then obviously we tried to improve it over the years, and it got incredibly popular. So I think we're now at 100, or I'm still saying we. The report is at 150,000 downloads every year,
Right.
which is a lot, and it's millions of clicks and reads, and has become a flagship thing for McKinsey, but also obviously for BF.
Right. What have been some of the surprises in this work? Has there been like revelations like, oh, I didn't think this would actually pan out, or maybe things you thought would pan out that didn't, or
Yeah, I think it came up in a lot of the discussions earlier because we're talking about a lot of things for a very long time. We're talking about the change of the back end. Yeah, we're going to digitize the back end. How long do we talk about that? 15 years?
Mm.
At least. Everybody's looking at Zara and Inditex and amazing things they do. I've seen very few players that have even adopted parts of that. Yeah. Sustainability is probably a topic that really broke through 6, 7, 8 years ago. I think the global fashion agenda has, I think they just had 15 years ago when they started. So we've come a long way in creating awareness for the topic. We still, it feels, have a long way to really generating impact on the topic and to walk the talk. So I think it's typically not a lack of understanding, it's not a lack of tools, it's not a lack of systems, it's a lack of will. And that's when I was at GFA earlier this year. I got a bit, worried and angry because I think the industry was talking about self-regulation for many, many years. Didn't want to have anybody, pushing anything on them. And then you got the feel that everybody was sitting on stage saying, "Oh, could the regulator please provide a playing field? Because if we move first, it's going to be a disadvantage." So this is the opposite of what we were debating for so many years. And then, of course, I think the current environment doesn't help, and it's a good reason to hide.
Speaking of the current environment, and speaking of, you've kind of been made your name as the guy behind State of Fashions. Let's talk about the State of Fashion 2024. Been a long summer, maybe reading the news, reflecting on what's been happening. What is your assessment? I have to ask you when I have
I
you
think
here.
it's
What is the
difficult.
state of fashion?
It's difficult, and it's as difficult as we expected in the last report. I think we had this pandemic phase that was kind of changing a lot of things. In hindsight, not as much as we probably thought at that point in time. And then we had that post-pandemic phase where people just thought, oh, it wasn't that bad, and things actually haven't changed, and everything is great. Yeah, and then we had after sales declines of 20%, we had sale increases of 30, 40%. Things were going through the roof. Look at the luxury industry. I think that they thought they had Midas touch, and whatever they would look for would generate amazing returns. And even the luxury industry has a lending, and some of the more successful ones have a softer lending. Look at Gucci and others; they have a bit of a tougher lending. So we are currently in a macroeconomic environment that is not helpful. And but besides of that, I think more importantly, I think the consumer is not in the mood to spend. I think that is what has fundamentally changed. I think during the pandemic they were not able to spend. Then you had the post-pandemic phase where things went, through the roof, and people got very excited, and they had a bit of a savings, from the pandemic fees. And now we are in a macro and otherwise hard unpredictable environment, and people just holding back. They are not as excited as they used to be. And of course, there is the few brands that get it right and that have that, as a friend of mine always said, have a clash with culture, yeah, where just it works. But if you look across the field, it's very slow and soft. And your next question will be, does that change? I would love to know, yeah, but I can tell you at least the indicators that you would hope for. Increasing orders in Asia are not happening, and
Right.
I assume there's a lot of wholesalers and brands that work with wholesalers in the room. If that is not happening, there's no volumes to sell. And therefore, also wholesale orders will not change. And look at Japan on Monday, and look at a potential big war in the Middle East, Ukraine, U.S. elections. It's just it's sobering, and it's not really clear when it will change.
But, and what is the best practice? Who does it right? Maybe if you want to give examples, or just examples from your advice to the industry.
Well, I think that it has been said earlier. I think the work that the Inditex group is doing is very impressive. It's just, I think that it's not only the impressive growth they've done over the last 20 plus years. They were at 1 billion in the early 2000s. They are now north of 30, yeah, which in itself is just impressive. And if you look at it, despite a bit the economical ups and downs, they have been consistently growing and successful. And you wonder yourself, you wonder looking at that, how long can that continue? But it seems to work very well. And then on the other hand, you got the LVMHs of the world who also seem to have Midas touch, I guess, and they even have their own Olympics now. Yeah, so I think that is quite impressive. And then of course you got Miu Miu at the moment, and Montclair I think is great, and you got my friends from Mango who are doing quite an impressive job. So, but it's the fashion industry. There's always some brands are always doing well, some brands are always suffering. That is going up and down typically, and e-commerce is booming. Then wholesale is not. Then as we heard earlier, wholesale was dead 10 years ago. It was all about direct to consumer. And guess what? It's not. Yeah, wholesale is still around. Yeah, and some of the brands that have been successful in recent years triggered it through wholesale because it's still a good channel for certain brands and certain businesses. So very hard to say, and that's what intrigues me about the future of fashion. Is I would love to understand, where is it heading, and what will be the themes that shape the next decade of the industry.
Before I ask you about that, we should be mentioned. You are based in Germany. You have this Swedish connection, of course, which we love. But we're here also at this Scandinavian fashion trade show. Any assessment on the Nordic market right now, the temperature or the brands?
Better than the German market, at least. Yeah. So, but yeah, it's also not clearly not booming. Yeah, and the weakness of the Swedish krona is also not helping. Yeah, and I think you are suffering from the same kind of lack of demand, lack of excitement. I think it's a general. It's people are not in the mood to spend, and if they spend it on vacations and not necessarily on dressing up. And if they have to cut somewhere because living expenses go up, they also cut on that end. And I think that is a bit the core question: is how do we get in a position, and how do we create stories and excitement, which still works? I think we spoke about some of those brands already. But it feels like it's more difficult on a broader scale.
Right, right. Well, sobering remarks for sure.
Talking to a German. That's the only difficult part with me thinking about the future of fashion. Might be a bit sobering.
So what is your take then? What can you say about your next step? Oh, you're still out there advising brands, of course, even if you're not in the McKinsey kind of umbrella. what is your interest in the future of fashion?
So I'm in the process of forming a team. So I got a you know, a small team already together, and I gonna do three things. I gonna work on a book about the future of fashion, and there will be publications around that and some media partnerships and things, which is changing a bit the view on from the state of fashion and from looking into what happened in the last year and what will going to happen in the next year, towards really the question, how does the next decade look like? Yeah, you know, and what will be the big themes? And of course, AI will be a big theme, but the core question is then, but how? Yeah, because you know, we talk about data for so long and we don't really feel it got the traction we wanted. Will that really change? You know, will we use data with AI if we haven't used it before? I think it's an interesting question to have. And you know, obviously, I got, you know, now my own research is starting in September, so it's going to be McKinsey style in terms of the quality of the research and the depth of the research. But it's also going to be based on interviewing some 50 CEOs, founders. Imran would say the trailblazers of the industry.
Mhm.
A lot of people that I know and that already, you know, agreed to interviews, but also the 20 others that I don't know and I always wanted to meet, never had a chance to meet. So I'm fulfilling a bit my own dreams in doing that, and that will likely take a year, I guess. It takes longer than I thought. You know, I just thought I can do that in 6 months, and then you start talking to a publisher, and you realize they on their own need 6 months.
Speaking about lead times, yeah.
My God, yeah. So that industry needs a back end revolution as well. Yeah? So and then secondly, I do advisory. I work with Mango, I work with a couple of other brands, and focus on the key decision makers. And then I'm talking to startups and PEs and everything, which I have to admit is the most difficult part of it all. Yeah, because
Also,
yeah, well, they're all close to Series A at least, yeah, and then you find out it's not as close as they say or as they think. Yeah, they all are very close to the breakthrough, and everybody's bootstrapped at the moment. And a lot of the VCs and PEs are sitting on their money, don't know how to deploy it, and I have two scarce resources. That's time and reputation. So I need to be difficult in what I really get involved in.
right, got it. So, running off, and I hear the lunch trolleys are rolling in here in the
You got
background.
me a
So,
great slot right before lunch.
yeah, yeah, but you're no, you're headlining this. Entering this project, focusing on the future of fashion, it's hard to reveal any insights as of now. But what are the types of questions you want to ask these some 50 CEOs of Trailblazers? What are you curious about? There's got to be a. You're
I think
heading somewhere
it
with this.
starts a bit with understanding how did we get here. Yeah, because I think also the state of fashion report was always a bit of, you know, we're looking at this 1 year and the 12 months back and forth. And I want to look at now, how did we get here from 2000 to 225? Yeah, and it's quite impressive. You know, H&M was a 1 billion company in 2001 as well, is now 20 plus billion as a group.
Mm.
A lot of other brands were big and don't even exist anymore. Think about all the mid-market department stores. So there's a lot of change in that period. There's a lot of, I think, lessons to learn from that. How did we get here? You know, I think we've seen three waves of fast fashion. I think when we talk now about Shein, you know, it's not that new. This is just the third wave of something that we thought was already over, you know, 5 years ago. Yeah. So, but it's still, because there's a consumer demand for that and there's a business model innovation behind it. So I want to understand, you know, that period and want to draw some of the learnings from that. And then I want to look at, surprisingly, the 10 themes that will shape the next decade. Maybe it's 8, maybe it's 12, but it's what are really the, of course, AI will be one of the important themes that will have an impact, or technology as such. And I would argue that the back end of product development hasn't changed for 15 years at least. So is that ripe for change and innovation? Um, I want to look at luxury. I think this is, will that go forever? And obviously, it's currently stumbling. So China was a big change agent in the last 25 years. Seems to be very different by now, also because of geopolitical situation. So, and through the interview, so I have obviously I have an idea what the 10 could be, yeah, and then I gonna sort the interviews accordingly and start with the last 25 years, and then look at the next 10.
Well, it sounds like you have your hands full. It's going to be super exciting
Not getting
following your
bored.
journey.
No.
Akim Berg, thank you so much for sharing your insights
Thanks for
here
having me.
today. And that rounds off this edition of Transformation Conference, our first here in Denmark. Thank you so much for coming and being so attentive listeners. It means the world to me and my team to be able to be here and do this most important work. So you have one more task here today. Grab your little lunch bag over there and grab a person you haven't spoken to before and try to make that connection so we can help transform this industry, and sign up to our newsletter, scandinavianmind.com/newsletter. Thank you so much.